Helldivers 2 draws its inspiration for the Terminids in the game from a lot of different sources. One main one is the movie Starship Troopers with its vast bugs that are invading the galaxy.
I'm doing my part.
The bugs actually aren't the ones doing the invading, the humans are the aggressor in that fight, but that's a story for a whole other day. But I think another place that the developers of Helldivers drew some inspiration from is the game Deep Rock Galactic. Deep Rock Galactic is a game where you play as a dwarf on Hoxie's 4 and you're dropping down onto a planet to mine minerals. And there is in fact a lot of bugs there that do not want you to mine those minerals. So today, we're going to sit down and talk about some of the similarities and differences between the bugs in Helldivers 2 and Deep Rock Galactic. So I hear you guys are dealing with a bug infestation just like us. Rock and stone! Oh, okay, that's neat, but what are your guys' bugs like? For Carl! Do you, say anything else besides yelling random phrases? I'm deeply traumatized with the bugs I've seen in the mines! Okay, I kinda liked it when you just said rock and stone better. So, before we talk about the specifics on how these bugs compare and how they differ, I think it's important we do a broad overview of the bugs themselves. Now, the Terminids, I've covered plenty in previous videos, so I won't waste your time re-covering them here, and I'll keep it brief. But if you do want to learn more about those Terminids, I'd love if you checked out the videos I have on my channel about them. And while you're at it, maybe considering that like and subscribe button. Alright, thank you, and back to the video. But for a brief overview on the Terminids, they are the bug enemy in the Helldivers universe. They evolved from just the bugs that were in the first Galactic War in Helldivers 1, and were mutated by humanity to the point we see today through various experimentation and testing to try to get more Element 710 out of them, which is actually just oil to power spaceships. They have evolved quite significantly from their early Helldivers 1 counterparts, and they've even evolved in the game of Helldivers 2, and you've seen flying ones in the Shriekers appear. And it seems that humanity keeps mutating these bugs, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to make worse monsters for us to fight. But now, let's break down those bugs from Deep Rock Galactic, because I've never really discussed them before, and there's a lot of interesting lore there to get into. The main bugs that you fight in Deep Rock Galactic are called the Glyphids. There's a couple other minor varieties you'll run into, but the vast majority of the bugs you'll face are in fact the Glyphids. Now, these Glyphids are an arachnid-like creature because they have 3 main body segments and 8 legs, much like spiders do. Now, Glyphids hatch from these fleshy, weird eggs that are scattered all around the caves on Hoxie's 4. And while you're down there mining, it's probably best to take some out while you can, so you can get rid of some of the future generations of Glyphids and hopefully make your life a little easier. But you'll notice that these eggs look very similar to the Terminid eggs you destroy in the Destroy the Eggs mission in Helldivers 2. Well, of course they're similar. Bugs come from eggs. Yeah, no, I got that little Helldiver, but I wanted to point it out to the viewers. Now, get out of here. But with that interruption over, a very interesting thing to notice about these Glyphids is that none of them have eyes. And that is because the Glyphids do not rely on sight because, until the dwarves come busting in to go mine minerals, these caves are completely dark. They don't need eyes. They operate off of vibrations. If they're hunting for prey, it's vibrations of them moving. If they're trying to stop the dwarves from stealing all their tasty minerals, it's the vibrations the dwarves make. And let me tell you, those dwarves make a lot of vibrations, which is why so many Glyphids come to fight them. But how exactly do these Glyphids communicate with each other? We know in Helldivers 2 that the Terminids communicate through pheromones. You'll see the little ones calling in bug breaches by shooting pheromones into the air. And the Glyphids are actually exactly the same. They use pheromones to communicate with each other. There actually is even an item in a game that the scout can take called the pheromone canister, and you can throw it and have bugs attracted to that instead of the dwarves themselves. Now, there's not a ton of information in either of these games' lores on whether their bugs are controlled by a hive mind or not, but I do want to discuss it because I think there's a chance that the Terminids in Helldivers 2 are controlled by a hive mind. And for that, a quick description on what a hive mind is exactly in case you're unfamiliar. A hive mind, in the sense of what we see on Earth, is like an ant colony. They're all working towards the same goal, they move around together, but it's not really a true hive mind in the fantasy science fiction sense of there is one singular mind controlling everything. An ant colony is more of controlled by pheromones, and they're all working together to just build a better anthill. If you're looking for more of the fantasy sense of a hive mind, where it is one super intelligent brain controlling everything from an entire group, the Grave Mind from Halo, or the Terminids in Warhammer 40k would be a good example. These two groups have one super intelligent brain controlling everything that they do and commanding each individual little bug on what to do through various mental links. Now, I think that the Terminids do have a hive mind controlling them. The reason I say this is because the Terminids like to invade other planets, which is showing kind of a push for growth from them. Like, they want to expand, they want to go somewhere. And they'd be tough to do from, like, between one planet to another. There's a lot of space between, you know, planets. So how exactly are they communicating? This may be through some type of hive mind structure that we have not met yet in the game. Now, I think almost certainly the Glyphids in Deep Rock Galactic do not operate off a hive mind. They show no urge to expand. They are just in their caves, defending their caves, and trying to survive. That's all. So they're just operating off pheromones, much like an ant colony does. They're there, in their little spot, and that's what they want to do. But I think that's about enough talking broadly about these bugs. Let's start to getting into some more specifics. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Glyphids had 8 legs and 3 body segments. This is where we get our first major difference between the Terminids and Glyphids. Terminids have 6 legs and only 2 body segments usually. And also, unlike the Glyphids, the Terminids do have eyes, because they live above ground and can in fact take in light to get useful information. Like, oh hey, there's a Helldiver over there I should go eat. And the Terminids also have a lot wider variety on what each individual Terminid looks like. The Glyphids, they all generally look like Glyphids when you look at them. Like, if I just start throwing images across here, they all look pretty similar. Whereas, like, Terminids, you've got the Bile Titan that's massive and has long legs. You've got the Nursing Spear, which is big and round and spits stuff at you. There's just a lot of variety in the Terminids, where the Glyphids all generally look like Glyphids. One other interesting thing of note is that the Glyphids do not have any flying bugs. And the Terminids have the Shrieker, which in fact flies and is a pain to deal with. The Glyphids instead will actually climb up the walls and ceiling to attack you from above. So they don't need to fly because, you know, they're in tight caves. Why would they bother flying when they can just climb up the side of the wall? Now, there is flying bugs in Deep Rock Galactic, and that is called the Macteras, which flap around and look like giant houseflies that, you know, eat you. But the Glyphids themselves do not fly. Now, there's a lot of similarities that can be drawn between a bug type in one game and a bug type in another game. So I'm going to go through all the bugs in Helldivers and see if there's a similar one that is in Deep Rock Galactic in the Glyphids. So for the Terminids, we're going to start small and work our way up. We'll start with the Scavenger. I think the closest we have to Scavenger in the Glyphids is probably the Glyphid Grunt. There is some smaller bugs in the Glyphids, but they're so tiny that they don't even match up to the Scavenger. You have the Glyphid Spawn and Glyphid Swarmer, but they're just little guys, and they really aren't much of a threat, whereas enough Scavengers can take you down. Looking at these two side by side, you'll see they're fairly small bugs. They're lightly armored. They are armored, though. They're not just squishy little bugs that you could slap once and then they explode. They got a little bit to them, and they take a little bit to take out. Now, the next small bug we have from the Terminids is the Bile Spitter, which is just a little guy that shoots goo at you that melts your leg. Now, we do have something called the Glyphid Acid Spitter, which sounds pretty darn similar, and while it is, they don't operate quite the same. The Bile Spitter gets real up close to you and spits goo on you, whereas the Glyphid Acid Spitter acts almost like a sniper. They'll hide up on walls and shoot goo at you from much further away. But this is still probably the closest relation we can get between the two games, because they both spit acid at you. Now, once you start talking about the slightly bigger bugs of the Terminids, like the Pouncer, the Hunter, the Warrior, things get a little confusing because they're fairly similar with, I mean, important differences and whatnot, but when you go over and look at the bugs in Deep Rock Galactic, you also run into a similar thing where you have different versions of the Grunt. You've got the Glyphid Grunt Slasher, you've got the standard Glyphid Grunt, you've got the Glyphid Grunt Guard that's more armored, and you could kind of lump all these into one category and say they're all similar to each other and they're all variations of the more basic bug. For example here, when you take a look at the Glyphid Grunt Slasher, it's got these big claws on the front of it. And honestly, this one looks more like all three of these Terminids, but we're going to go with it's fairly similar to the Hunter that's got some big claws it comes and stabs you with. Whereas like the Glyphid Grunt Guard is a bit more armored and looks kind of like the Warrior, or you could kind of even call it the Hive Guard since it's more heavily armored. These bugs here get a little hairy because there's no real good direct comparison between all of them. So they're just kind of a category of medium-sized bug that does things bad to the various main characters of the game. Now, before we move on to the bigger bugs of the Terminids, there was one very interesting bug in the Glyphids that I want to talk about that would be terrifying if it was added into Helldivers 2. So devs, you better not be listening to this video, and if you are, please don't add the Glyphid Exploder, because this little guy will run around in the cave, is quite fast, runs up to you, and in fact, explodes. There really isn't a bug comparable to this in Helldivers, but I wanted to bring it up just because think about how bad it would be if there was. Do you want to fight exploding bugs along with all the other bugs you have to fight already? That would suck. So you're telling me some of your bugs will just run straight up to you and explode? Aye, you heard that right. They'll just skitter on up and go kablooey. But that's not the end of it. There's bigger ones too that are slower, but it's a much bigger explosion. And then there's this one weird bug. It's a big explosion bug, but it turns everything around it into gold. Oh my god, that sounds awful. How do you deal with it? Well, we blow it up and mine the gold, of course. Rock and stone, am I right? Yeah, you heard the dwarf there right. They have a bigger exploding bug called the bulk detonator that'll run around and create a massive explosion, making huge holes in the cave and taking all sorts of dwarves. And they even have a really weird version of it called the Crassus detonator that turns everything into gold for some reason. The Terminids don't have anything like this, luckily, but it'd be pretty cool if they had something similar to the Crassus detonator that just blew up and threw weapons and ammo everywhere. It'd be kind of fun. It wouldn't make any sense, but it'd be kind of fun. Next on our list to talk about for Terminids is the oh-so-beloved Charger. I say with much malice in my voice because I can't tell how many times the Charger has just run circles around me and flattened me. But the Charger does in fact have a really good comparison in Deep Rock Galactic in the Glyphid Praetorian. Now, the Glyphid Praetorian doesn't do the exact same thing. It doesn't run straight at you and bonk into you with its face. Instead, it shoots toxic goo at you, much like, the Bile Titans or the Bile Spewers. But this bug here is the exact same role of heavily armored, and if you try to shoot in the front, you're going to get nowhere. You got to sneak around back to hit its weak spot. Much like the Charger has a weak spot in the back, the Glyphid Praetorian also has a weak spot in the back. These two types of bugs are so similar that not only does the Charger have an upgraded version in Helldivers 2 in the Behemoth, Deep Rock Galactic has an upgraded Praetorian called the Glyphid Oppressor, which is exactly how the Behemoth is to the Charger: larger, more armored, tougher to take out. The Oppressor is larger, more armored, tougher to take out. But they still have a weak point in the back. So these two sets of bugs, when you compare them side by side, are probably the most similar bugs between the two games. Heavily armored, tough to take out, and meant to draw your fire from the other bugs. They act the exact same in both games. Now, those are the most similar bugs in my opinion, but that doesn't mean there's not another two bugs that I think are also very similar to each other. Helldivers 2 has the Stalker, the awful bug that turns invisible, comes up, and just stabs you in the legs. Deep Rock Galactic also has a Stalker that acts almost the exact same. Goes invisible, hides around caves, and then takes out the dwarves. But the Deep Rock Galactic Stalker gets even another ability. After it comes and attacks you, it can burrow away and reposition itself to another part of the cave. The Helldivers 2 Stalker cannot burrow. Sure, it can jump back fairly quickly and go invisible again, but it can't fully make itself invulnerable by burrowing away. Now, we're starting to run out of Terminids from Helldivers 2 to compare to bugs here, and the couple remaining ones we have left don't really have a great comparison in Deep Rock Galactic. The Bile Titan and Impaler, they're both large bugs, difficult to take out, they're not insane. The closest we have in Deep Rock Galactic is probably the Dreadnoughts in the game. Now, these Dreadnoughts are meant to be bosses because they have a whole boss health bar, they're a boss fight. This is truly a boss, whereas the Bile Titan and Impaler, they're large bugs, but they're not insane to take out. Sure, they're difficult, you gotta seriously focus on them, but it's not a boss by any means, so they're kinda comparable, but it's not great. Now, we are out of bugs in the Terminids to compare, but there is one more Glyphid in Deep Rock Galactic that I want to talk about because it's a weird one, and I just want to look at how different it is from anything we have in Helldivers 2. The Glyphid Warden. The Glyphid Warden is a real funky little guy. By little guy, I mean actually fairly big guy. It's got this giant lump on its back that it uses to power up bugs around it. It'll shoot purple sparkles over them. They're probably some type of pheromone that encourages the bug to be faster, stronger, do more damage. And Helldivers does not have anything like this, but if it did, that'd be terrifying. Imagine some weird armored thing powering up Bile Titans. That would be horrendous to deal with. In Deep Rock Galactic, these things are a prime target to take out as soon as you see them, because they'll make every other bug you fight way worse to deal with. So, hopefully you've enjoyed this comparison and contrasting of these two different games' bugs. I had a lot of fun digging into the lore of both and trying to mash them together to see what interesting conclusions we could pull from each of them. If you did enjoy this video, I'd love you to hit the like button down below and consider subscribing to my channel to stay tuned for more. It really is the best way to support me, and I love to see all the nice comments you guys leave. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.